So today I thought it would be fun to take you along while I try my hand at duplicate stitch. It's actually something I've never tried before, but essentially what you do is you take a pattern and you stitch it to the front of a knitted sweater. So I actually have one of my cozy mock neck sweaters here. This is actually the first sweater that I made. Well, I've made quite a few of the cozy mock neck sweaters, and this is the one that I made as a sample for the pattern release. And I really love the white and the red contrasting detail on the edges, but I don't use it, or I don't wear it as often as the brown one, because that one, after I made that, just became my absolute favorite. So I was thinking when I was scrolling on Pinterest, and also when I saw that post from the knitter, that I could actually stitch a heart on it instead of creating a whole new sweater. Why not already use what I have? So I still have some yarn left over from when I knitted this sweater, and I think that's the perfect use for it. So let's give it a try. Okay, so I think what I'm gonna do to start is to, of course, I'm gonna need my darning needle. So I'll take that out. But then I also kind of want to get some stitch markers.
So I thought the best way to start this project was to get a general outline of how I wanted the heart to look. First, I identified the centermost point of my sweater, and taking a few clip-on stitch markers, I began hooking the stitches where each outer corner of the heart would be. Starting in the center, I made a rough guess of how many stitches wide the upper curves of the heart would be, making sure I counted and placed a stitch marker on both sides for symmetry. Once I had all corners marked, I did a final check to make sure everything was symmetrical. I was obviously doing this because I wasn't following a chart, but I have created one based off of my final result for you to use, which is linked in the description. Finally, I was ready to start working in duplicate stitch. To start, you need to secure the yarn at the back to make sure you have some stability while you work. I did this by weaving in the tail, as I would with any excess yarn. Then I began working horizontally towards the left, starting at the center point. Really, stockinette stitch is just a series of tiny V's, so we'll use this pattern as our guide as we work. Insert your needle from back to front at the base of the first V stitch you want to duplicate. Then identify the stitch just above in the next row. Slide your needle behind both stitches of the V, and thread your working yarn through and back down the same point where you first inserted your needle. You've just made one duplicate stitch. What I had read about duplicate stitch is either you should work horizontally or vertically one row at a time. My initial idea was to work half of the heart horizontally, using shorter strands of around 80 centimeters as recommended to keep my work tidy. Watching this back, you can definitely see the more stitches I made, the less I was sure of what I was doing, regardless if I had the heart-shaped outline to follow. And then this was the point where I stopped and decided to just rip it all out and start all over.
It's a new day, and here you can see that I've gone ahead off camera and did one half of the heart just to make sure that I was getting the right shape that I wanted, and also that I knew exactly what I was doing so that I could better inform you on the steps, the best way to do it. As you can see, I didn't really follow the shape that I had originally planned out, but I left them here anyway just to show you that comparison. Instead, I decided to go with a straight diagonal line at the bottom. So let's go ahead and get started on the second side of my heart.
When you're ready to start a new row, take your needle and feed it through the very bottom of the V shape. So as I mentioned before, I am going in a diagonal line all the way up to the point that I want to stop my heart at the bottom. So the most, I guess, the bottom right corner. So each time I'm taking my work up one row. So I have a new strand of yarn here. I recommend having around 140 to 150 centimeters of string per row. And what you're gonna do is you feed your needle up to the very bottom of the V, and then you identify the next row. So one row up from where I wanna cover with my duplicate stitch would be right here, and I take my needle and I feed it through behind the two points of the V. So as you might know, if you're seaming, there's a bar between that. Make sure you don't get that caught in. We're just getting these 2 points of the V. And then you pull the string through. Depending on the yarn that you're using, maybe you want to fluff it up a little bit to make sure that it's providing the right amount of coverage. So then, as you can see, I have one part of the duplicate stitch there. And then what I need to do, I'm going to hold the back of my work for stability, and I'm going to take my needle and insert it through the point where I first came from in the back, going from front to back and then pulling. Here you don't want to be too tight with it because, as you can already see, it takes a little bit of getting used to. You kind of have to adjust, and you want it to be tight enough that it's secure and not too loose that it's going to undo, but not too tight so that you see the white popping through or whatever color you might have of your original sweater. And then you take your needle and you do it all over again. So you pull it up through the very bottom point of the V. And when you're starting a new row, you might have to juggle between, keeping the bottom stitch secure and working from the top. And then identify that next row, insert between the 2 points and pull. And then take your needle and insert it back down the point where you came from to the back of your work and pull through. And then you just continue that process.
So now that it's all said and done, I do have a couple of thoughts on this project. First of all, I'm very happy with how it turned out. When I was in the process of doing the duplicate stitch, I was really doubting that the result would actually turn into anything that I would be happy with, or let alone keeping. Because to be honest, I had some moments when I thought I was just gonna, after filming this, just rip it out completely, but I've changed my mind, so that's a positive. Here is what I have left. So I wanna say I had maybe half a skein of wool, and I still have at least a quarter left over, so I could use this for another scrap project. So it actually doesn't use as much wool as I was thinking. However, there are some things that I really was not happy with in this process. I found that duplicate stitch itself was very tedious. I'm somebody who really does not like sewing panels together or weaving in my ends. So duplicate stitch was basically that times 100 and it felt even more unnecessary because, the garment was already finished. It was kind of an extra add-on piece and I was almost putting myself through torture. But if you actually wanted a sweater with a heart in it and you're starting from scratch, I would definitely recommend to knit using the intarsia method, which I actually have a video showing you exactly how to do that. I just feel like if you already know that going into it, why do this extra step? And also the other thing that I noticed, and maybe it's just my inexperience, but with duplicate stitch, you do run the risk of seeing through. As you can see here, the white is obviously showing through. So the main color of my sweater is gonna show through in some moments. And I mean, it kind of looks cool a little bit, but then, I mean, again, if you could do it all at once, why wouldn't you? That's just my personal opinion. I wasn't really sure how this project was going to turn out because I did have to stop halfway through and regroup and figure out the best way going forward. I definitely recommend going from bottom to top instead of horizontal from side to side. Doing the vertical method is also much better if you're trying to conserve yarn or you're not sure if you have enough. I think that definitely makes it a little bit easier and it doesn't waste as much as if you were doing the horizontal method. In general, I think this project, if you have some spare yarn around and you want to bring new life to a sweater that you already own, duplicate stitch is a great way of doing that, and I would highly recommend it for any zero waste projects that you might have. But I'm definitely more team Intarsia. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you tuning in and watching me on my journey to see how I tackle duplicate stitch for the first time. Again, this was a project that I've never done before, and I really appreciate you coming along. Let me know what your thoughts are and how this project turned out. I think personally I really like it, and I will definitely keep it this way and use it, especially for Valentine's Day coming up. Did any of that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay.